Hey everyone, I am here with my friend Carrie Hauskens. I'm super excited about this edition of Childless Chats because we are going to be talking all about just kind of how hard the holidays are for those of us who are childless and getting some ideas of how we can navigate the holidays and make them feel not as crappy. And then we'll also be talking about how we can kind of come up with our own ideas for traditions, maybe brand new ones or playing off of ones that exist, but that make them a little bit friendlier for our lives without kids and make them feel like a better fit. So if you don't know me, I'm Katie from Chasing Creation, and I was hosting this series for about 2 years monthly, and then I let it go for a while, and I'm really excited to be bringing it back up because I think being able to invite amazing people like Carrie to just chat with me about things that are on my mind regarding childlessness has been just such a highlight for me. So welcome, Carrie. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Carrie Hauskens. I'm Blooming with Care on Instagram, and I'm on there a lot. So just a little bit of my background. My husband and I tried 8 years to have a baby. We had miscarriages. I did deliver my daughter stillborn in May 2019. I carried her for 8 months. So we thought we were close. And then this whole new grief world came into our life. And then we worked with a surrogate for about 2 years, and that didn't work out either. And we have been happily child-free, deciding, for about 1.5 years. And it's definitely changed a lot of things about how our lives work. And I was a teacher for 10 years. And dealing with infertility and then deciding to be child-free, that was really difficult. It wasn't the main reason why I left teaching, but now I am a freelance writer, and that has been a main new source of income for me for the past about 6 months. And I focus on infertility and grief, and I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I didn't know it was going to make me feel this good, and that's where I'm at.
That's amazing, Carrie. I didn't know that you were doing freelance writing and that you weren't teaching anymore. That's incredible. I feel like I keep up with your Instagram feed, but I missed this. So that is super exciting.
It wasn't expected because I wanted to go back to teaching because I was teaching art, which was what I loved. And then the art, I should say the district, I guess, didn't really enjoy how I thought about art. And so I said, I don't think this is a good match. So and then I was like, okay, what do I do? And I've always been a writer. And then people started kind of reaching out to me for writing and speaking, basically, is what I do a lot of writing. Yeah, it's really fun.
Oh, well, congrats. I can't think of a better person to move into that space and be able to, talk about it and be able to provide some kind of comfort and guidance to others who are going through it, because you lived in that infertility and with your daughter being stillborn, you just went through so much for so long that I feel like it really defined a lot of years of your life.
Yes, and it still does, and I love that it still grows, and that's what I write about. So
yeah. Well, one of the things I really love about your Instagram account is how you think about both grief and joy and really make room for both in your life, and you are very open about how you kind of navigate both of those together, and I love that. Yeah, it is. Well, welcome. It's so great to have you here. So I guess we should just dive in. So the first kind of topic that I want to cover, which I know is a huge one, is how do we deal with insensitive comments or obnoxious questions or unsolicited advice that we get when we are socializing for holiday events?
So I worked a lot with my therapist with this because especially going back to work because I delivered Clementine stillborn in May, and then I went back to work in August as a teacher. And I was so afraid of what people would say because everybody saw me pregnant and where's my baby, and especially with kids, because kids, teaching kids, they don't have a filter, and many adults don't either. So it was kind of like a good practice for me. So I always like to have a narrative ready, and it might sound like overkill. I've definitely had people be like, that seems like a lot of work. And it's like, you're obviously not in this space then, because I will literally practice a narrative of what I'm going to say. And that honestly changes day to day, hour to hour, depends on where I'm going, who I'm going to see. And I just kind of, I guess I just kind of have low expectations and that people are going to ask me questions that are going to break my heart. And then if they don't ask me, it's like a win, but I just kind of expect it and almost like put on an armor to be ready for it and like have things ready to go of like, oh, you know, because the inevitable, do you have kids question comes up. And it's like, okay, well, we tried, or just a no, or, you know, my daughter died. Like, what level am I going to give to the person? And again, it changes day to day, but literally like practicing it. Sometimes I've even like written it down, like going to like new places where nobody knows me and just seeing what feels good. And for me, I had to like kind of test it out and see what did feel good and what didn't, but just, and you kind of start to feel it of like, oh, that just flowed out easily. And it wasn't like jarring. And it's weird at first. It's super weird at first.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I've approached it too, is doing a lot of practice and coming up with, I have like 3 or 4 go-tos depending on the situation. And then I'll think about like, okay, which one do I want to use depending on like, who am I talking to? What's the setting? How am I feeling emotionally? Like,
and sometimes you feel it with people. Like, I feel like at least dealing with this grief, I've like, I can gauge people even like without talking to them to where I'm like, I feel like I can say something. Also, I'm an oversharer. That's like also part of, you know, like it's how I get comfortable. And so honestly, I probably say a lot before I say less, but that's what makes me.
So, okay, I have a couple before I have something I want to say to you about that, but I'm just, I want to just note that I had forgotten to make chat live for everybody. So it is now. So if you want to join us in the chat, feel free. It looks like a few people have already. And let's see, I'm just looking here. If you want to add where you're joining from and your name, it'd be great to be able to see where you're joining from. We are recording this, but the chat won't show up on the recording. So you can put that in there anonymously. We'll see it and it won't show up in the recording. So okay, so is it possible to link your Instagram handle here in the chat? Yeah, I don't think we can actually hyperlink it, but I did put it in the chat and I'll put it in there again, but it's at Blooming with Care. And I'll put it in here again.
Thank you. I'm on there a lot and I talk about all this a lot.
Your content is just so good. Like everything, I'm always like, oh, Carrie, I just want to give you a hug. You're the best. Okay, mostly, so I'm just putting here.
Like online has been where I found so most of my connections, which has been really great because it's hard to like, you know, going in your everyday life. They're not all the people that you need, or the people that show up, I should say, aren't always the people you'd expect. And an online community has been really great. I've been really thankful for that.
Yes, same. I mean, that's where my initial meeting people is through Instagram. And then I kind of now in the last few months have been in Lighthouse Women, which was formerly Gateway Women's online community. So it's been really great to get to have a new, it's like private from Instagram. So it's kind of nice because you can talk in, especially for people who don't want to be talking publicly about it. It's a nice forum. Okay, so what I wanted to say with in this kind of conversation about planning things out is I'm also an oversharer, but I get that not everybody is. So I think I'm maybe more comfortable oversharing, and it probably is not good sometimes. But for those of you who may not be comfortable sharing anything at all, like I didn't really realize how many women really haven't talked to anyone about their childlessness. So including like, you know, their parents or their siblings or their best friend, and they're really keeping it inside. So if that is you and it's not something you're used to talking about or want to talk about, especially with random people like the aunt or uncle you see once a year, or like a stranger that is also at a party you're at, I think there's some good like dodging techniques, because I know for me sometimes it felt like if I just tried to kind of brush off by saying, oh, kids weren't for us, or like I don't know, tried to kind of not lie about it, but just kind of do a brush off answer, that it felt really inauthentic. Like I felt like well, someone's asking me if I have kids, I have to tell them all the background or else I'm not being true to like my story and who I am. And then I started kind of shifting to thinking, not everyone deserves my story. I don't owe everyone my story,
Yes.
and they don't want it. Like they're not actually asking for,
Yes.
were you able to have kids? Like
Right.
how has your life circumstances gone for you in this area? Like they it's going to make them uncomfortable most likely.
Yes.
So, sometimes I'm fine with that and I'll make them uncomfortable, but sometimes I just want to get out of the conversation. So
Absolutely.
if this is you, I've found a couple of things that have worked are, you could just say something like, that's a painful topic for me. I'd prefer not to talk about it. Or if you even don't want to go to that level, you could just say like, something like, no, no kids, but I really love having some free time to spend on my garden or whatever. Like think about something in advance that you do want to talk about, something that
Doesn't
brings
say
you
that'll
joy.
shift the
And
conversation. What are
yep,
you
in
growing
the
in your
same
garden?
breath. Like
Yes,
it
exactly.
doesn't give them like it doesn't give them that space to come back to that. You're switching the topic. So you could say like, no, don't have kids, but yeah, I love to garden and that's where I've been spending a lot of my free time. Do you garden at all? Like I grew these amazing tomatoes and here's the recipes. Just start talking about something else. And once the topic is shifted, most people will understand that they're not gonna like,
Right. And I think that
yeah.
I love the idea of having like something ready like that because there is a
Mm-hmm.
dead space sometimes to where it's like you can hear crickets of like, oh, something bad happened. Like you
Yeah.
see them like trying to figure it out. And so it's nice to have your hobbies or something you're interested in, or even a show you just watch, something
Yep.
very simple that everyone can relate on.
Yeah. And I think like even being preemptive about that before they have time to ask you about kids stuff is like having a couple of topics in advance. Like, um, I think someone in the chat just made a really good point that like most people aren't actually curious about this part of your life. They're really asking because they are trying to find a point of connection. And because most other women have kids, they are, and I say that because I have noticed that I don't think men get asked this question quite as often, about having kids, um, from at least what I've seen. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, getting asked, I think they're trying to find a point of connection. They're trying to find an easy
Something
in
to
with
talk about.
you.
Like it's the small talk.
Yeah,
We're just trying to
it's small
like
talk.
carry on the conversation. And I feel like when we've dealt with something like this, like small talk is, we dread it
Yep.
because even more so because it's like, oh God, those questions are going to come up. And so having just things to go in your pocket, again, like when I go to a party, it's like, okay, what am I going to say? And I think,
Yeah, I do too. I think about it in advance. So even like I can come up with 5 things right now. Like, oh yeah, I'm currently reading this book. What are you reading?
mhm,
I just finished watching the series blank. Have you watched that? What are you watching? These sweet potatoes are amazing. Do you know who made these? I want to see if I can get the recipe. Uh, I love talking about, my nieces and nephews, which I know as kids. So sometimes if people ask me about kids, I'll say no, but I've got nieces and nephews, and then I'll start
mhm,
sharing stories about them.
mhm,
And the fifth one's kind of weird, but people ask me about work a lot. And
mhm.
now that I'm doing childless stuff, it's actually a conversation stopper because
Yes.
they say, like, what do you do for work? And I'll say, oh, I like work with the childless community of like people who wanted to have kids and couldn't. And they're like, oh, and then they turn away from me and then they walk away. And I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah, that
That's,
is also for me becoming a freelance writer. I was just at a dinner party last night and I just specifically didn't say what I write about unless somebody asked me because I was like, it's going to change the mood. I've seen the
mhm.
look on people's faces when I'm like, I write about grief. They're like, oh, like, and it's like, we don't have to talk about it. Like, I get it, you know? And so that is an interesting point of like, I don't know. And also sometimes work isn't fun to talk about for people. Like,
No, yeah. That's the thing. I always think it's weird that people's starter questions are like, work and do you have kids? And I'm like, oh, both of those. I mean, I
yeah,
actually enjoy talking about what I do now, but people don't want to hear my answer and talk to me about it. So like I'm happy to share, but it kind of is like a conversation stopper. Um, so I'm just trying to think about if you have other strategies. I know someone mentioned that they can't really even talk about this without having like tears well up. And I remember I
yeah,
had about 2 or 3 years where that was the case, where if, even if like, I remember being on a plane and someone asking and me immediately just starting to cry, or like at a work event where I was trying to be professional and put together. And one of our volunteers asked me, she asked me about having kids. I said, no, I kept it together. And then she said, didn't you want them? And that fall, like I got through the first question, the follow-up question was like,
Oh my
this
gosh.
was like, this was like 2 months before my hysterectomy. Like I was in the very, like knowing after everything that like my ability to have children was coming to an end. And I was just like, ugh. So yeah, I think there are those times where
It
your grief
happens.
is so surface level that even just like those tears are just ready.
Yeah. And that's why I
just
kind of
one
just
tiny thing.
expect it. Like like I said, like if it doesn't happen, it's exciting. I also like to ask people questions about themselves because people love talking about themselves. So like if you're becoming like genuinely interested in their life, not even maybe you haven't watched a show, but they're gonna go on and on about a show. You can like genuinely, or not even genuinely, pretend to care, like just to be like, just encourage that pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone has questions specifically about this. If you do, I think let's talk through a couple other areas and then we can take like whatever questions you have at the end. So I noticed the chat is pretty lively, which is fantastic. I love seeing y'all making connections and having kind of a side chat here about what's coming up for you as we talk about this. So if you do have a question, if you want to find on your bottom like bar, there should be a Q&A button. And if you click that one, that will come into a different, that'll come in differently for us so that I can actually see them and they won't get lost in the chat scroll. So yeah, so I do want to just note too, that this is actually something that me and my friend Tanya Hubbard, who's a counselor in this space, have talked about, which is this idea of like, how do we navigate the world as people who are childless, that we knowing that we can't really change people's response to us. Like, you know, I do on my account on Instagram, I'll talk a lot about like, here's why you shouldn't ask this. And I try to do some public awareness stuff that I hope gets out there. But like, I'm a tiny person, like maybe a couple thousand people are going to see it and they're mostly all childless. So it's really hard. I don't think we can have expectations that anytime soon we're going to be able to go out into the world and not be asked about these things. And like, it sucks, but we do need to figure out in advance, like, how are we going to prepare? Because the alternative is to like just stay isolated and not
because
be out doing things.
Happen. Like it's going to happen. It's just one of the top 5 questions, top 3 questions I feel like I get asked anywhere I go and meet new people. And I think also like knowing that like it might hurt and that's okay, because I used to hide that and be like, I'm fine, it doesn't hurt. And then I would go home and cry for hours. And it's, no, it's okay that it hurts. And, you know, hopefully I don't cry in public. Sometimes I do, but also like, again, I think just kind of knowing that that's coming and being prepared for it. Like my therapy should say like, okay, we're going to put on our narrative armor of like, we have our ideas and we can take it off later, but like, just kind of knowing that it's going to show up.
Yeah. And, you know, I think one of the things that makes it really hard about crying in public, obviously there's some embarrassment maybe that you feel about somebody coming to like just want to have small talk with you and now you're crying like instantly. Like I think there's some like embarrassment of that, of like, oh my gosh. And so then you're like feeling like, oh, I just broke this like social like there's like a social taboo, like I can't cry.
I'm that person now here, like
exactly. And so I think then there becomes some like embarrassment or like maybe even shame around that, which I think is just natural. Like I'm not saying you should feel ashamed, it's just that's I think what comes up for a lot of us. And then the other person is going to get uncomfortable, so then you are wondering about how you can help them save face or them feel like better about it.
Their pieces, and it's
it gets messy. And that was actually, I first like thought about this concept from, there's a woman named Marnie Rosner who wrote her dissertation, her PhD dissertation on, she did like a qualitative study on women who were childless and looked at them like 10 years later and interviewed them. And that's one of the things she talked about, was this idea of like, we get on, like we start crying, it makes them uncomfortable, then we may be thinking about like, oh gosh, now this is awkward, and now they feel bad because they obviously triggered something. So this could be a time, I think, where maybe you wouldn't normally just say preemptively, like, this is a painful topic for me, I'd rather not talk about it. But that might be a really good one for if you are having tears well up, to just say that and like, let's move on. Or even you might want to excuse yourself and just say, hey, I just need a couple, like, this is really painful for me. You didn't know, it's fine. I'm gonna take a few minute break, and just kind of let yourself have that time. Maybe find a bathroom, find somewhere you can be alone and just take a few minutes to kind of get what you need. Or, I mean, one thing I know you talked about last year, Carrie, or a couple of years ago, we had some conversations about this where you talked about having like a code word to leave.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My husband and I have that all the time. Or even to going like to parties with coworkers and friends, to where I'm like, okay, like that was my cue, and having some sort of signal of like, this is it, I'm done.
Yeah.
And like on my brain. And I, like a few years ago, I remember I was at a Christmas party and I had a panic attack, and I didn't know where I was all of a sudden. And like kids were everywhere, and it wasn't even about kids. It was just life.
Yeah.
And I just like grabbed my purse and I walked out, and I just waited for my husband outside. And I was like, I just can't be in there anymore. And I didn't, like, sometimes you have to do that, and it's okay. And yes, it's embarrassing, but like, so what, like some of my moments are when I'm embarrassed. So like,
it's part of being vulnerable. It's part of being authentic. It's just part of the experience of life that all of us has. Like, we're all going to have times in our life where we feel those things, and it just is what it is. So so I think that is a really great idea, though, that I have thought about a lot since you told me that. So if you are attending a party with someone else and it's someone you feel comfortable with, like if you are with a partner, with your mom, with your siblings, with a friend, if you're attending with someone else, if you have that kind of relationship where you can say like, hey, if something hard comes up for me, is it okay if we leave, and I can bust out this code word and you'll know that I'm really struggling and might want a ride home or something. And then similarly, if you're attending on your own, just give yourself that permission to feel like you can leave at any time if things aren't feeling good.
I've set timers on my phone to like, my time will go off when I'm alone somewhere, and I'll like look at my phone and be like, oh, I have to leave.
And
or like, oh, I can just turn it off, depending. It's kind of like the calling your friend on a date situation of like, you okay? Like, do you need an emergency exit? I can make up an emergency. We can do that for ourselves, and just because your mental health is the most important thing. So like, yes, you might be lying, but you're taking care of yourself. So like, who cares?
Oh yeah. I've watched enough Saved by the Bell over the years to know about how to construct like some Zach Morris style, I'm getting out of this situation, like having a friend call, whatever. So
I also had somebody at work when I was teaching. I had a coworker where I said, she was like my work wife, as we called it. I was like, when I came back after all of our infertility trials, it was like, your room is going to be my safe space. And if I need to get out, I mean, you couldn't leave my students, but like, there were many times where like I was on break and she wasn't, and I would just go into her room and I would just sit in the back just to be like, I don't want to talk to people. You're teaching, so like no one's going to come to me. And like, just creating those safe spaces, and almost like navigating, knowing where you're at. Like if you're going to a party, okay, where's the bathroom, just so I can know. And just knowing, it's almost like they help me feel safe because I know I have a safe.
And I have had times, I remember being at a party, at a Halloween party, and no one even said anything to me. Nothing happened. I was just having kind of a hard day. And I remember sitting in the bathroom and having like a 10-minute cry break. I literally just sat on the floor and cried for a bit.
Put yourself together. Yes. The car is a good one for me. I know we've all cried in our car. Like, that's
like, okay, this is what's happening now.
Yep.
Okay, before I move on to the next topic, do you have anything else that you wanted to like
Those
share
are my
about
go-tos in that area? That's like,
okay. I'm just gonna check the chat to see if I know a couple of people had some responses to things we said, so I want to just kind of see what's in here, see if we missed anything. Okay, I think we've gotten most of these. This one is kind of fun. Someone said, I love this response from a 70-year-old when asked, do you have children? She said, not yet, with a really cheeky smile on her face.
That's funny.
That is great.
Hope to have that attitude when I'm there.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Someone else said that they like to have go-tos, like what's important for you in your life or what gives you the most meaning in your life right now, instead of going straight to job or children. And those are really meaty, fun questions. So yeah, thank you for those suggestions. I think even just asking people like what their hobbies are, like, you know, how do you like to spend your free time?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you spend your free time? Because I feel like I asked somebody recently about what their hobby is, and they had this like fear on their face. I was like, oh, this is not a good question for you. What do you do in your free time? And they had hobbies, but they didn't like identify them as that.
Yeah,
and so,
yeah.
Okay, I know that look. We can change the subject.
Yeah. So someone said this might be harsh, but are the people who are that careless with their insensitive questions really worth talking to? And yeah, I mean, I actually agree with you. I have like one person in my extended family that a couple that I know are just gonna be like really horrid to talk to, and so one of them I just avoid. I will go out of my way. Like I'll see him a couple times a year at holiday events, and like I don't talk to him really.
The main people that I think of, they're my family, to where it's like, well, I have to, not have to, but they're at gatherings and honestly,
they're around, yeah.
You know, and my mom and I are very close. So my mom has asked me a lot of really inappropriate questions too. And
I
have the conversation with her of like, hey, that hurts my feelings. And she was like, oh, I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm like, I get it. I just, sometimes that's like too much for me.
And I think it's like, what's the intention, right? Like some people are just rude and like, you know, or maybe it's like a stranger at a party where you don't have any, you can just kind of duck out of that conversation. You don't have to engage with them. But yeah, it might be someone like a sibling or a parent or someone that you are a best friend, like someone that you are really close to. And I think in those instances, there may be times where it's worth having the conversations and trying to explain. Maybe they don't understand why the questions are insensitive, because they haven't been on the other side of it. So I think it depends on who it is, in my opinion. Like some people, it's true. It's like, yeah, they're not worth talking to. And then sometimes it's like, maybe they just need a little grace and like having those conversations with them later.
Yes. And on the other side of that, like some people won't get that. Like my former best friend, we're not friends anymore because of being childless. And I would say something to her of like, hey, that's hurting my feelings. And she would laugh. And it was like, oh, like that's.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I get why you might think that's funny to you, but like, it's not funny to me. And it's like, that's the reality of it. And that was like one of the hardest breakups of my life, because she was my maid of honor at my wedding, but like, we couldn't come back together. And that's also totally normal, totally okay. Like one of those things of like, I didn't want to spend my time trying to educate her and like bring her in. It was like, I'm exhausted. Like, if you don't get it, I think we're done. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a good response from you. It sounds like that was the best thing to do in that situation. You tried, and multiple times she showed you she wasn't willing to give or try to understand. And I just interviewed Dr. Marissa Franco, who has a book called Platonic About Friendships, and she introduced me to a new term called mutuality. And it is this idea of like, are both people willing and able to give what the other person's needing? Or is it a situation where you're like always spending, compromising, like, and that I think about that a lot, because I think I'm a person who tends to do that. And so this mutuality piece is like, I'm thinking about this more.
I love that.
Yeah. So someone else said, we are normalizing sadness and grief by doing that. I think she wrote this when we were talking about crying in public. It's their responsibility to be with their emotions. If they get uncomfortable, really not ours. And I do agree with that too. I don't think that we have a responsibility to take care of someone else's feelings. But I think we can think about like if it's a stranger or someone we don't know that well and it's uncomfortable for us, then it might feel better to just address like, oh, I'm sorry, this is really painful. You're good. You didn't know. I'm gonna duck out for a minute just to like
with the person, how you feel, like how much you want to go into like,
yeah.
It just depends.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's see what else is in here. Someone else said again, I have no time for anyone who would judge a person for crying or struggling. Really, who cares what they think? So yeah, I think a lot of times that's the case. No need to think about others in the moment, just self-care, self-care, self-care. Yep. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just trying to scan here. A few people are talking about some stories that of the times that they have faced this too.
I see that somebody wrote about, I find that young kids ask me a lot where my children are. And as a former teacher, that gets asked all the time. And from my personal experience, I feel like kids are so open to where I would say, I don't have kids. Not everybody has kids. And just kind of like drop that little seed in their bucket just to be like, and then they'll be like chocolate, or they'll be, it's like, and then I also had some kids that be like, you had a baby in your belly. Where is it? And I would say my baby died. But it was like, I'm just gonna be honest, because this is my reality and there's nothing wrong with it. And just kind of, you don't have to give them all the details, but kids are pretty good at being like, okay, moving on to the next thing.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I think our next, someone mentioned self-care, self-care, self-care. And I think that is, I don't have the outline up that I sent to you, but I'm pretty sure this was next on the list, was just like, how do we make sure that we're making time during this season? I mean, really all the time, but I think especially the holiday season, there's just so much that comes up that can be extra triggering for us, that we really need to make sure we're making time for ourselves. And I'll also note one thing I know that can really complicate this is if you are traveling for the holidays and you don't have your own space. So you're staying with family, you're staying with someone else.
I'm gonna do that in a few days.
It makes it so much harder. I mean, depending on who it is. Like I usually was coming home staying with my mom, and I had my own room, and she's very respectful if I like needed to just be alone for a bit or whatever. But I know that can be really challenging. Like if you're staying with your in-laws and
so this is an interesting story. So my mother-in-law, they have grandchildren. I have 2 nieces, and we're going to go stay with my in-laws in a few days. And my mother-in-law kindly asked me, she said, hey, the girls are going to be there. There's this like big zoo Christmas lights thing. It's for kids. Would you be interested in going? And I was like, thank you for asking. No, I don't want to go to that.
Yeah.
And then I just talked to her a couple of days ago, and she was like, I got us all tickets. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I have been brainstorming ideas of like how I'm going to handle this, because I know she spent a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
And, we don't go visit her a lot because she lives far away. So it's funny because like younger Carrie would have been like, oh, I'll just drink, but I don't drink a ton of alcohol anymore. So like that, I can't just hide anymore.
One coping mechanism gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably unhealthy one. I actually have a rule because I have, I'm very afraid of addiction, and like, cause I've got some family stuff. So I have a rule that I tend not to drink if it's emotionally, like if it's emotional drinking.
Ooh, good rule.
Yeah.
Because that rule in my life.
Well, I drink like socially, and I'll drink like if I'm just like, oh, I'm in like a good mood, but this sounds fun to have like a cocktail or something. But if I'm like, oh, I feel terrible, I need a drink, then, and I'm no judgment for anybody like who is not doing this, but just for me, that's something I try to like delineate. But anyway, that is off topic. Okay, Carrie, let's hear about, so what are you going to do?
I think we're going to go. And my husband and I talked about maybe like taking our own car, because we're renting our car. That is a big thing that we do when we travel to people. We get our own vehicle, like if we're going somewhere, because I need an out, even if I'm like a tampon or something, to just like leave. And that is like one of my non-negotiables. If we're going to be staying at somebody's house, I need my own space. And it's not cheap. I'm not going to lie. Like we had to save up to rent a car because this is wild times, but this was like non-negotiable for me. And so like, having to like, oh, we'll take our own vehicle, or we might leave the family, like still be with all the kids, but like not be with our immediate family. Like these are
Yeah.
that I'm discussing, because strangers are not gonna know who I are. There's not gonna be like kids hanging on me. And we also discussed like maybe being like, we maybe will refund her for the tickets and go out to dinner ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
just like having, and it's going to depend on the day, I know, but this was one of those moments where I was like, wow, you were extremely kind and asked me all the right questions, and then either forgot about it or got
Yeah.
here.
What happened?
She's so focused on her grandkids that it's pretty intense, and
Yeah.
we've had family discussions about it because it is so intense. So like she's just got the tunnel vision, and
Yeah.
so it's going to be interesting. We don't really know what we're going to do, but I do have some like options. I like,
Yeah.
like need some backup plans.
Oh, it's so interesting to me that she had the foresight to ask you if it's something you wanted to attend. You said no, and then she still bought the tickets anyway. That's so weird.
I know, it was like, I didn't know what to say, because it was like, we already had this conversation. So, and this is one of those moments where like, I feel like the family did the right thing and then they did not do the right thing, which is common. I feel like with these people in our lives that don't live our life and know what it's like to be in our situation. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm sorry you are dealing with that. On kind of a related note, I'm actually supposed to be going to one of those like light show things with my nieces and nephews tonight, but I am at a place where I'm like not griefy at all. So I'm like, this actually sounds fun, except that it's gonna be cold. So I might not go because it's only supposed to be like 40 degrees outside. But it is, I think it's really important to kind of gauge where you're at currently, and like let yourself, like you may have one year where you're like, this sucks, and then I'm not doing this sounds terrible, and then the next year you're like, oh, this is actually sounding really fun, and then the next year you're like, no, this sounds like it sucks again, I can't handle this. So I think also just like giving yourself permission to go with what you're needing at the time. Like it may even sound fun up to the day or up to when you get there, and then partway through you're like, this was a mistake, and just allowing yourself to like be with your emotions and be okay with like what you're needing at different times.
And it's taken me a lot of practice to like know that if I'm in a situation with people that know my situation and I'm like, I'm going to leave. I used to feel this guilt of like, oh, I have to show up, I have to do this. We don't. And we don't need permission, which is something I work with my therapist a lot, is like, I don't need permission to like just leave. I'm an adult, like I get to do what I want. And it's not about anybody else. And if they make it about themselves, that's on them, as we kind of mentioned before. And so like, cause I could picture us having a fun time there. And then, us being like, I gotta go. We can just go. Like, it can just be that. It doesn't have to be a fight. And if somebody wants to make it a fight, I'm going to be like, we're not fighting about this. Like, I'm not. You're welcome to have whatever emotions you have, but I'm not. And it's been interesting because I've been in a much better space, but my husband hasn't. And he's not very good at like he'll just get angry. And I'm like, something obviously is going on. And so I've been trying to almost like over prepare to be like, okay, I'm not gonna say no to your mom, but I will. Like, I'm happy to, because I've worked on this,
Well, I think it's great that you have done so much work in this area and have really, I mean, it's one of the reasons I asked you on, because I know you put a lot of thought into this, and that comes through in like how you're able to talk about it and sharing your strategies. So really appreciate it. Okay, so self-care. I want to start with a really fun one, I think, which is kind of a big one that I have never done, but it's giving yourself permission to do something else during the holidays. So I have heard of people taking really fun like solo trips, or getting together with a couple of girlfriends that are single and planning like, for Christmas this year, we're not hanging out with family. We are either just staying home and doing something on our own, or we're going to plan a trip, or we're going to spend the day doing something that feels really nourishing and fun. And that's a big one. I have not done that, but I know that's a lot of people in our community do, and I think it's pretty badass.
I did that the year that Clementine died. I didn't want to I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be with my
Yeah.
family. I didn't want to face them. They all knew the story, but I didn't want to do it.
Yep.
And I always wanted to spend Christmas in Europe. So we did. And it's one of my favorite memories that I've ever done. And our family was really gracious, but I was scared that I was going to hurt some people's feelings. And I probably did, but I
Yeah.
couldn't. Sometimes you don't have the capacity for that.
Mm-hmm.
We get this one life, like let's make it
Yeah.
so much fun. And if your family brings you down, like it's okay if you don't. Like I used to work at a restaurant that was open on Christmas. And and I loved working on Christmas because I made really good tips.
Yeah.
So we would often do like a family celebration after Christmas, like at another time, which
Mm-hmm.
was always kind of more fun anyways, because there was less people. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just like my immediate family. And it was a fun way for me to pay my way through grad school and be able to like have our own kind of family time with our own
Yeah.
traditions.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's some good models for that too, of like people setting up like Friendsgivings or like alternative holidays where they just spend it with like a couple friends and have it be, I was going to say more low key, but maybe even extravagant, but just
Mhm.
doing it with different people, you know? Um, so I think that that's a really good tip. And maybe it's that you just need to do that for a few years because you are in that really deepest grief and it's just, you know, you don't want to have to deal with it. And then
Mhm.
maybe it'll get to a point where it feels good again. Or maybe you're like, wow, it's so much better to spend
Right.
Christmas in Mexico. I'm doing this every year, whatever. Like, but I think just allowing yourself permission to just do what feels good for you too.
Yes. And on that note, because of working at this restaurant, like I would do on like Christmas night or something, I would go to a friend's family. And
Mm-hmm.
I had become the like outlet of that friend of being like, oh my God, like this family's intense. And I'm like, it is, and it's not mine. Kind of loving that like I'm not alone in it and it's not my family and like experiencing it through like another family.
Yeah, yeah. um okay, so that's a big self-care one that is pretty like I don't want to say extreme but it's like, it takes some planning. It's like
It'll take some planning. There'll be lots of
yeah,
responses. You're going to have to
yeah,
navigate your way through that with talking.
right. What are some other ideas that you have for really making sure that you're prioritizing self-care? I think the idea of having a car available if you are traveling so that you have a way out, or like, if you can't afford a rental car for the whole time, Uber. I
Yes.
think it's harder to make an Uber excuse because it's like
Yes.
people
But
know that you're like
I don't
having
know.
that it
I feel
wasn't expected, but
like my brother and I are pretty good. We've always been able to like get out because technically my brother and I are and our parents are no longer together, but we celebrate holidays together.
mm,
Our families are wild. And we have been really good at being like, oh, we gotta go do this thing. Oh,
yeah,
I gotta go see this person. And like another thing, I don't usually stay at my family's house when I go visit them. It's there was some like upsettingness in the beginning, but now it's just kind of the norm. And I find I
mm,
have a friend in my hometown that I stay with her. Or if she's not around, we'll get like a crappy hotel room that smells like smoke, but we are on our own. And it is
yep,
like something that has meant a lot to us. In fact, I was just talking to my girlfriend because I was like, hey, we're coming down. Can we stay with you again? And she was like, yes, I'm really stressed about my family. Would you like to go get a massage the day after Christmas? And I was like,
yeah. Someone just mentioned that in the chat.
so my girlfriend and I are going to go get a massage while the rest of our families do whatever. I don't know. You're all adults. You can figure it out. But like, I'm so excited about that.
I love that. Yeah, that's amazing. I think another thing I've been thinking about is, and maybe this falls a little bit under, this may be more under, I'm going to save it for the traditions piece. I think this is more a traditions one.
Okay.
But I do think that on the self-care piece, it's like scheduling in time that you can set aside to just be by yourself if that's what you're needing, because or being with a friend or like someone who is going to help you, that you can just be like authentic with, that you can just kind of like, that can sit with you in that grief. And one of the things that I have found is that like a lot of churches offer, I don't know if this is just in the US, so maybe if you are joining and you're not in the US, you can tell us if this is more of like a global thing, but I know a lot of churches in the US offer like a Blue Christmas service. It's
I
usually
just heard
on,
about this today. I've never heard of
yeah,
it.
it's usually on winter solstice, like the evening of winter solstice, which is like December 21st, and they'll have like a service that's basically just for if you're grieving. Um, I am not religious, but I also don't think I mean, maybe it probably depends on what it is, but I'm sure if there are some denominations where it wouldn't feel super churchy if you're not like a churchy person. If you are, great, but like if you're not, I think it's just like a place where you can go and sit with others who are also grieving during the holidays and not have to feel alone, and just like this intentional space for that, which I think is very cool.
I think it's so cool. Like I said, I just heard about it this morning and I was like, oh, I want to look into this. Cause again, I'm
Mhm.
also not religious, but I love exploring different ways and just trying
Yeah.
to see if it feels good. I can leave
Mhm.
if I want, but just trying all of the different things to see what feels good to me because I won't know until I try it.
Yep, absolutely. One thing I will just note too, I am going to be hosting a webinar that's the same format. So if you join it, like you'll just see me and hear me, but it doesn't work both ways around. So this way you can feel really comfortable in joining, and just if you're crying or you're letting your grief out or whatever, you can join it without having to be on camera or have your audio on or anything like that. But I basically got the idea from hearing about these Blue Christmases. I wanted to host something on our own that is aimed at those of us who are childless. And so I've hosted it a couple times, and I just love it. It's like a candle ceremony. It's very simple, but it's just like a kind of a guided ritual or like a guided meditation to just help to let go of some of the grief that you're feeling and to have space to do that. And one
Right.
thing that I built into it too is that we kind of go through that through the beginning of it. And then at the end, we talk about just knowing how many others, because last year I think we had, I can't remember, like maybe 50 people join it or something. And so it was like just knowing that even though you might be in your house, you might feel alone, you're on Zoom, but your camera's off. And so you're just seeing me, but knowing that there are 50 other people out there with candles lit who are in this space with you, sharing that space with you at the same time. I just thought there was something really powerful in that. And just really nice to have like a little bit of space set aside where you can just acknowledge, like, God, this
Absolutely.
stuff's hard. I'm feeling it. And I just want some like intentional space to let it go.
I love that because one of my, I don't want to say favorite things. One thing that's helped me the most, I should say, because none of this is easy, is like knowing that I'm not alone in this and
Yeah.
knowing that like there's a community. And I was just thinking about how like I don't even intentionally do it, but a lot of times I'm at a party or somewhere and I will end up talking to someone that's childless, not knowing that they are,
Yeah.
but like it's almost like we're drawn together because we know it. And it's just like, oh, it just feels so good. And you don't even have to talk to this person ever again, but you're like, I'm not alone.
Yeah. It's like a gravitational pull of
Yes.
like, I can feel your childless
Yes.
energy. Let's connect. um Yeah, I do think that's so important. And for those of you who are part of Lighthouse Women, we do have like a 24-hour support text chat that day. So no matter where you are in the world, we keep it going to go across time zones so that for all of Christmas Day, if you're feeling it and you just need to connect with someone else or a few people who are also feeling it, you can hop on and have that support there. So I think that is such a big one though, is like having people who get it. And a lot of times I think that is where online friends can come in, right? Because sometimes you might not have those people in your personal relationships in
Yeah.
person, but there's so many opportunities now to make friends and connect online with other people who are childless. And it's been my saving grace for sure. Like it's just been
Yes.
amazing.
And it like gives me confidence to like be
Yeah.
myself a lot more of like, well, I know I'm not alone. And even though like this person might not be here physically, I know that they might be going through the same thing. Like
Hmm.
last night I went to dinner party and I ended up kind of like in a corner talking to this woman for hours, which is normal for me. Like that'll
Yeah.
happen. And never talked about kids. And she's older than I am. And this is my first time meeting her. And I don't know her because it's like, this was my husband's work people.
Hmm.
my husband went to work today and I called him and I said, we'll call her Carol. I was like, does Carol have kids? And he was like, no, I assumed you guys were talking about that in the corner. And I was like, no, but I was thinking about our conversation this morning and I was like, we never talked about kids. And it was like, it wasn't, she never asked me. I never asked her. Like we talked about so many other things. And I was like, I find them. And I think it's because I talk about other things. I bring it up. I kind of lead that or I was asking questions about herself. I just thought that was kind of funny. I was like, I found like one of the only childless people in the room and I didn't know it.
Yeah, totally. Well, and it's a different vibe to talk to someone that doesn't have kids. Like I think sometimes when I host online events, it's like, and we might not even be talking about anything related to being childless, but it's just the idea that like you're in a space with other people who, don't have kids and aren't going to bring it up, and you're not going to have any of those like triggering comments. And it's like, when do you get that in real life? It's like very unique.
Talking about like practicing that, you kind of, maybe that's how I'm finding these people, is because I'm not talking about kids, I'm talking about their stuff.
What else do you have on self-care?
So I do love a lot of massages. I also just like really delight in a cup of coffee or tea quietly. Right now we don't have a fireplace. We hope to someday, but I literally put on the fireplace on like YouTube or Netflix, and I sit there and I'm quiet and I listen to the fire, and it's just like this lovely solitude thing that and as I'm sitting there, often I'm like, I wouldn't get this if I was living a different life right now. Like Monday morning, getting to do this before I get to work, starting to do that. Like I try to relish it. And I know that like, especially like on TikTok right now, it's like, romanticize your life. I like actively started doing that, and little things become like my favorite things. And it's almost like over dramatic, but then it becomes your norm of like, no, like a really special moment. And so being quiet a lot is like a really nice thing for me. Or on the flip side of that, I have a lot of dance parties in my kitchen. Like I was listening to like women empowerment songs and was like making my toast and just like, just like really loving any part of my life that I can. And I had to start forcing myself to do that, I will say, because when I was in some really tough times and I was like, I'm so tired of crying. I'm tired of my eyes literally being swollen. I'm just going to like force myself to do it. And then it started to become like, it started to feel better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I actually am the same. I love having dance parties by myself. I'll just put headphones on and put on some of my favorite music. And just dance, and it feels so good, and it's a fun way to get a little bit of movement in, because I'm not like an exercise person. I know that sounds bad, but it's hard for me.
You said recently you were like, who loves fitness? I don't love fitness, something like that, and I was like, that's so real.
Yeah, I won't even get into that, but I know it's bad. I know I should be like, it's good for us to move our bodies and have fitness in our lives. I get it. But yeah, for me, I agree with you on like those moments, like building those moments into your day is also one of my favorite things. I have a really hard time with quiet because I'm just like, go all the time. Like I have a really hard time sitting still. But for me, I think my equivalent is like finding time to be able to play video games.
Ooh.
If I'm playing video games, I know that I am like giving myself the time to do something that I want that's not productive. Because I think sometimes even if I have like downtime, I'll be like, okay, I'll do like this, like even knitting, I'll turn it into productivity where it's like I'll knit, but it has to be a blanket for someone, or it has to be like, there has to be an end purpose of it. And I'm trying to undo that productivity mindset
too. Like I like to have a finished product, because then you could be like done with it and there is like a goal. I love a goal. So like I can see that, and you can kind of work with that to make it yours. Like when my mother-in-law was here, she stayed with us for like a week, and she didn't really understand the whole like I work from home situation, and so it was like I wasn't getting work done, and I pulled out a puzzle. And it was such a nice, like neutralizer, because
I love puzzles. Yep.
We do a thing of like, every time you get a piece, you can say click, click. So like, you don't have to say anything. It's just like click, click. Oh, she got a piece. Oh, she got a piece. And there's an end goal. You finish it, it can be quiet. We turned on a movie during it, like, that was something nice to have with family. And I love doing puzzles alone myself, but,
yeah. I feel like that end goal is different from the productivity piece though.
Sure,
Like
sure.
I'm trying to unwind the like productivity that I have to be like doing something productive that has like a, yeah. So for me, yeah, I love that idea. I love doing puzzles. I love the idea of just sitting with someone quietly doing a puzzle with like a movie on. That sounds like absolute joy to me.
And it's nice with family because like sometimes, when you're just sitting there and you're like staying with them or something, like we
Yeah.
bring a puzzle to my dad's house because we'll be long to where it's like, we don't have to be like talking about everything, and just like, you can put a puzzle on and then you can talk, but a lot of times we get quiet.
Yeah. No, totally. I love that idea. I also just, for me, it's about building in like kind of knowing what refills my cup. Like
Yes.
what are the things when I spend time doing them that I end up feeling kind of energized and like have more maybe not even energized, but maybe for me it's like calmness. Like I feel calmer afterwards. And so for me that's like I take really long baths. I know that's a very like
Same.
you have one outside. I'm so
Yes.
jealous of it.
We do have a bathtub outside because I love baths so much. Like and I listen, and I'm not usually quiet out there. I'll be honest. I'm usually listening to books and love audiobooks, or
Same.
listening to a podcast. That's usually like, people are like, "Oh, do you meditate out there?" And I'm like, "No, I'm usually like listening to like sexy rom-com stories." Like,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't really do anything quietly. But I'll take long baths and I will take my phone in there, which I know is risky business, but
I know. My husband always says it. He goes, "Really?" And I'm like, I'm fine.
but yeah, my new thing too is like I've been playing a lot of Sudoku. It's a great brain quieter for me. So I'll even like put music on. I've been obsessed with like Harry Styles' new album, so I'll just put it on repeat and just listen to it over and over again and play Sudoku for hours, like take a bath, playing video games. Like those are things that when I get done doing them, I'm just like, oh, I feel really calm right now. And so I think with this holiday season, like your things may be different, but knowing what are those things for you that when you take time to do them, you end up feeling calmer and kind of centered and just feel a little bit
and
better.
like making time for it, because it can get so busy. Like I remember a couple months ago, one of my friends was like, "Oh, I want to go, to this show." And I was like, "I literally don't have a weekend free. Like, this is where I'm at right now." And so now I have to like specifically add in time because I love a schedule. I love checking things off a list. And so when I put like one of my new obsessions is decorating things with disco tiles. Like I put in like, you get 2 hours to like watch a holiday movie and just glue on disco tiles. And it's
that's amazing. Okay, so I'll just tell you, I have no sense of time and I have a really hard time with scheduling anything. So so that actually brings me to a point, which is that we are at an hour mark and I'm realizing I didn't set an end time for this conversation. So if we went another 30 minutes, could you do that? Or do you have like a hard stop right now?
I am free this morning. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so if you are watching and you're like, oh my gosh, how long can these people talk for? The answer is probably forever, but I think we'll go for another 30 minutes to cover like the traditions piece. And then if you are like, oh my, I'm feeling zoomed out, we're going to record this. We'll share afters if you want to watch it in 2 sittings. That's totally fine. But if you want to stay on with us, it looks like we have about 53 people. We love having you here. So hang in there with us if you're still enjoying it. I always look at like I upload all my YouTube videos are like an hour to an hour and a half long because they're all these. And then I'll like watch things and it's like the best clip, like you should be doing like no longer than 7-minute clips. And I'm like, that's not gonna happen. Nope.
That's not.
I'm long form, baby. Like
my favorite podcasts are like 3 hours long. So
same. I just feel like how can you actually get in depth with anything in 7 minutes? Like I want to get to the meat. So okay. So yeah, that's my poor scheduling stuff coming through, but okay. This is my attempt. I'll just show you to get organized. I just bought well, I have like 3 planners that I don't use. So then I was like, maybe like individual things will work for me. So this is like my December brain dump that's just like
Oh yeah.
garbage, like
Huh?
huge list. And then I have all these like different forms to try to like put it into weekly and then put it into daily and have assignment trackers. And you can see these are all blank. And I have it's like a huge stack because I'm like, I can do this and I can't do it. I can't. Anyway, that's my own personal problem. So it has nothing to do with
Well, I love a
this.
timer. I love a timer. A lot of times I'll just set something on a timer because if it's not on a timer, I won't. Yeah, I won't.
I just got this. It's got times 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And so when you set it down, it'll automatically start counting down whatever time you have it set to. And it's been amazing because sometimes if I don't want to do something, I'll be like, I can do anything for 5 minutes. I'm just going to set this for 5 minutes.
Yes.
Anyway, this is getting into
But that
not
even
related.
like something for self-care. Like if you're like, I don't have time, we do have time to like make ourselves feel good. If you're at your family's party or something like that, you can go sit, put a timer for somewhere and
yep,
that's
true.
a
And you have those on your phones too. So like, yep. Okay, so let's maybe, I know we have a couple questions. Let's maybe take a few of these and then move into traditions. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay, so someone said, how do you deal with family just not considering you, your needs, wants, schedule, etc. at the holidays because you're single and childless? I feel like I'm just expected to go along with whatever is planned. 100%. I feel this too. Like, I definitely think holidays are child-centered. And so it's
Absolutely.
usually everything that's scheduled is around kids, kids' schedules, kids, like kids, everything. So yeah, Carrie, do you have anything on this
Well,
one?
this makes me also think of too, especially when I was a teacher, my family would like leave me with the kids and I would be like, oh no, like I get paid to do this. I'm not, that was like I had to put a boundary up and people got mad, but, and it's like, yes, I'll have fun with your kids and I will engage them, but this is not my job. And I don't want to do this the whole time I'm here. So, I have gotten really good at boundaries. I love practicing them. I've definitely made some people upset, but it's like me just exploring. What was the question?
Like how do you deal with family that's not considering you or your needs because they're just like scheduling stuff around kids or themselves?
We have nieces and like on my other side of the family, there's lots of younger cousins. So like it's a thing. I feel like I used to do a lot of more things that were like I would go with the flow. But as it's especially now that's like established that we're not having children, it's like, oh no, I get to go do something else. Like I'm gonna leave and go to my friend's house. And I think it's the boundaries is a big part for me. And also knowing that like your family can go do the kid things, like that's okay. You don't have to join them. If you want to make special time outside of that, you can. Which is what we ended up doing. I end up doing a lot with my friends because it does get so focused and just kind of like, I don't know, like knowing that like two things can be happening and it's okay. And so a lot of times, again, like having our own car, like I'll leave. Oh, it's like kids time. Okay. I can't do this. Or, oh, I'm here for the kids for just a second. And then I'm out. Like I will show my face. We'll take a picture or two. And then it's like, I can leave or go take a walk or something like that. But definitely, and even like sometimes when I know like I am feeling good, I want to keep it going and I will like make myself leave for a second just to be like, we don't need to overload. We don't need to become overwhelmed. And yes, it's going good, but like we can still take a break even when it's going well.
Yep, totally. I love all of those recommendations. I would just add a couple of things that I do. So one is actually I was going to put into the traditions piece, but since we're going to be segueing into that, it's a perfect time for me to talk about, I think, which is that I have been starting to think about like, what could I plan that I want to do that's not centered on kids and then plan it myself. So like this year, I actually haven't done it yet, but I was thinking about reaching out to my siblings, my mom and my dad and just saying like, hey, I would love to have like a kid-free dinner one night. And I don't really like cooking or hosting or like, I'm just not into that. It's so much work for me. I get overwhelmed, but like, I will pick the restaurant, like I'll set up the reservation for us. It does this night work for you, and planning a time where or even maybe like, do you want to come over to have cocktails, something kind of simple, but
Mhm.
having something that sounds fun to you, that is like an adult only thing, if that's what you're looking for, or like you can invite your friends if it's not family, right? But like if you're really craving, like I wish I could do something around the holidays that wasn't centered on kids, like maybe it's up to you that you're going to have to put something together that's that, and it doesn't have to be anything
I think,
big.
yeah, I think that when you were talking about like making the reservation and doing that, like when you lead it, people
Yep.
will probably follow because they're like,
Yep.
oh yeah, sure, I'll join. I want to see you. And I think it's that initiation part that
Mm-hmm.
will make it happen, because other
Yep.
people, especially if they have kids, they're not going to be thinking about, oh, how will Carrie feel good? Like they're not going to be thinking about that.
Yep. And like I think when I think about holidays, part of what keeps me from this is that I do get really overwhelmed by thinking about like I don't want to have to cook for like 8 people or like open my house to everyone. It just sounds really overwhelming. But um thinking, so for me it's like I've been thinking about, is there a place in town that does like an afternoon tea? And I could just invite like a few people, friends or family or whatever, to do like an afternoon tea, or like just go get a drink together um at like a nice cocktail bar or something, and being, yeah, taking the lead on that space, but thinking about something that's just for adults. Or like maybe I know my mom goes to um Handel's Messiah. I think it's like a singing thing. She has like friends, so she organizes it. She'll invite all of her friends, and they just go to like, I guess it's at a theater or something, but like
Mhm.
it's a live singing performance, and it happens the same time every year. So she does that with her friends, where it's like a tradition where they know it's coming. She organizes it every year, where it's already going on. She just gets like reminds everyone and gets the group together and gets the tickets together so they can sit with one another. So I think part of it is like, are there things you wish that you were doing that aren't happening that you can take on initiating and creating for
Right.
yourself?
And that's the thing,
Um,
again, on the initiation part, because I feel like I used to not want to take the lead of things.
mhm.
And I was kind of uncomfortable because it was like going against the norm of what my family does or what
Yeah,
people around me do. But now these things are some of my favorite parts,
yeah.
the new
And I,
tradition.
yeah, and I think like there are going to be times where you're not really going to get people to adjust their schedules, right? Like I feel like
Of
Christmas Day in
course.
my family is pretty set. Like it does revolve around like it starts with the kids opening presents, and then we're going to all do a Christmas breakfast together, and then like a lot of times we'll end up going to my in-laws, but like those schedules are set. I
Mhm.
don't have any
Yeah,
like, for me to think I'm going to change that, it's just not going to happen.
right, right.
But I do decide what parts of that do I want to be a part of. So there
Exactly.
have been years where it was like too hard for me, where I was like, I cannot go to my sister's and watch a bunch of kids open presents in their cute little matching pajamas because it's just too cute. Like I
Mhm.
can't handle it. It's too much.
Mhm.
And so I have had years where I'm like, I'm skipping this. Um, and that feels really good. And then now I'm back to a place where I'm like, it sounds fun to see that.
Yes. Mhm.
But I think letting yourself say no to stuff, like just because your family schedules a billion things doesn't mean you need to be at every billion thing. Like you can give yourself permission to say, this feels pretty good. So I'm gonna come, like I'm gonna come to the brunch after, but I'm not gonna be there for the present
Right.
opening. And then find something that feels nice to do that morning instead. Maybe that's
Yes.
just like being in bed reading and having quiet time, like some of those quiet times we talked about, or maybe it's making yourself a really like fancy breakfast, or I don't know what it is for you, but finding something in place of that.
Yeah. So we have a tradition in my family where my dad started a long time ago. The day after Christmas, my dad would give my brother and I gift cards to go to the outlets. It's like in the town nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always kind of like a shit show. Nothing's really left, but like we make it this fun thing. We were just talking about this because um I kind of, and we've brought in a few friends that come with us that are always in the town with us. And this year I want to make a trophy and have a scavenger hunt.
Mm-hmm.
No kids are involved. We're at the mall. Like we're not really mall people. So it's like, ooh, we're like entering this new space. We like have lunch at like some chain restaurant and like order huge iced teas. And it's just like this silly thing. But I was talking to my brother about, I'm like, what if I made a trophy and like we have a scavenger hunt? And his first question was like, well, who are the teams gonna be? And I was like, I don't know what that answer is, but I feel like that means you're in. And it's like, I'm excited. I want to make it more fun because we don't have kids. There are kids in our family, but they don't come with us. That's never been a thing.
Mhm.
And it's like something that we look forward to every year. And we've missed it like twice. And it's been like a big deal to where like
Mhm.
we even still like had to call each other on FaceTime and be like, okay, these are the clothes I got. Like, this is what happened.
That's
And
amazing.
we're just silly adults, you know?
Yeah. What I love about that is it kind of brings in the element of play, which
Yeah.
I think is like a really important thing is as I think about reimagining traditions. To me, I think about like what makes something a tradition, what makes it special. And to me, it's thinking about who do you want to be involved in it.
Yes.
So sometimes that might be family or just certain members of your family, but sometimes that may also not be family. It might be this is a tradition I want to do alone. This is a tradition I want to do with a partner. This is a tradition I want to do with my friends or a friend. Um, this is a tradition I want to do in community. So I'm going to plan something like I'm going to host something, see if I can host something at like my church or like whatever it is, like thinking about who you want to spend it with.
All different ways of looking at it. Cause sometimes
Mhm.
want different things for different reasons. I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, who do I want to spend it with? Like, who do I want to be involved in this tradition? And what do I want it to like? What do I want the meaning of it to be? Or like, what do I want it to do for me? And so, a lot of the traditions that we have are very kid focused. And I think sometimes when we don't have kids, we cut ourselves off from those. Like, oh, well, I can't carve pumpkins because that's like a kid thing to do. But like, I will buy pumpkins or turnips because I found out turnips are what used to be
Yes.
carved and they turn into these cute little shriveled things that are adorable faces. Um, but I'll still do that, or I'll still make a gingerbread house, or I'll still like, I'll put on Christmas music and like, do some kind of crafty thing. And
Yes.
I think thinking about like, what do you miss? What did you want to experience with your kids? Like, you obviously can't like recreate all those things,
Uh-huh.
but you
You can
can think
still
of
do
like,
them.
yeah, bring the things that are going to bring play and joy in. Like a few people mentioned advent calendars
Mm-hmm.
and that they have so many grown-up ones. Like they even have like whiskey ones where you open the little doors and there's like a different whiskey sampler in there every day, or like different types of tea or different
I
types
have
of
a jam
chocolate.
one right now that I'm obsessed with. Jam.
Oh,
It's
that sounds
teeny
great.
tiny bon maman. I don't even know how to say
Oh
it.
yeah.
I mean, like I think about it when I wake up, I'm like, what jam am I going to get today? Because I have my coffee and my jam.
Yep.
Like, I'll be honest, my husband and I started doing it together. He didn't care as much. I
Yeah.
totally care. And
Yep.
I think about it every day. And and it's just like a small little thing. And I have half on my toast. And then at
Mm-hmm.
night I put it on my ice cream for dessert. Like it makes me so happy.
Yeah, stuff like that is, I think you and I share that in common, that we can have big joy in really little things. Like
Yeah.
it's the little things that bring us lots of like joy and pleasure, because I'm the same way. And I think setting yourself up, like you wanted to do a stocking, make yourself that damn stocking and put all the things in it that are gonna like light you up, even though you know it's in there, whatever. Or maybe you could do like a stocking exchange with a best friend. If you want a surprise, be like, hey, let's put a limit of $25 on it, but let's do a stocking exchange. Um, Thinking about things that you can do that help to bring in that play and joy element can be really nice.
Mhm.
And it's a good way to like
I know we've
get
talked.
that holiday spirit.
Yes. And I know we've talked a lot about like permission, and I felt like I couldn't do those things because, especially when I was in like that heavy space, which still comes honestly, of like, God, I don't have children and I tried so hard, and giving yourself permission of like, I can still do that. Like we make a big deal about Christmas lights, and we have like friends come and we drive our converted school bus around with candy cane hot chocolate and like,
Oh my gosh, you're so cute. I love this idea. Oh my gosh.
we always like to go on a weekend because there's a few neighborhoods, I feel like everywhere has like those few neighborhoods where it's like, it's so slow and we just drive, and sometimes we'll pour schnapps in our coffee and sometimes just like not, but like, it's like my mom the other day was like, hey, it's almost Christmas. You're going to be gone soon. When are we doing that? And we all get matching hats and like, it's something so silly. And what's funny is one year when we first made our bus, a couple of my girlfriends with kids were like, hey, can we we'll pay you to drive us our kids around and do that. And I was like, I don't want to do it like that. Like that makes it something else. And it's mine and I'm going to keep it.
I love that. And I love that you recognizing that boundary and just saying, nope, this isn't like a kid thing. And I think that's the thing, like maybe it feels like it should be a kid thing, but you can turn it into like, no, I'm doing this for myself and I'm going to be unapologetic about it. One thing I've been getting really into is realizing that a lot of the holidays that we celebrate, if you celebrate like, like Christian holidays, is that most of those are based on like pagan holidays, and those, a lot of them were not kid centered in the same way that ours are. And so if you kind of go back to the roots of the holiday, sometimes you can find some really fun traditions, like Easter, for example, was originally a pagan holiday that was around like solstice. So if you wanted to, like, I've looked into the origins of that, and like knowing that, so I have found like recipes to dye eggs but use all your own natural dyes. And so a lot of it is around like intention setting, so you can write on there what you hope to see this next year, what you want to focus on, with like one of those white crayons that shows up once you dye the egg. And then I made my own dyes of like coffee, blueberries, and they turned out really pretty. Did not look all like your traditional dyes that you buy. And then you bury them out in the backyard to like set the intentions and stuff. So I love looking at the pagan origins of things, because sometimes there are things in there that are really cool traditions and have really deep meaning, and like, but are also fun and playful. And they're not kid-centered. So that's one of my tips too.
It's nice to be able to find those things that aren't kid-centered, because it's almost like we get something too. Like I love candles, a lot of candles. And I remember when my first niece was born and she was really small, my sister-in-law was like, there's too many candles here. And I was like, not for me. And I had like 250 candles for one dinner. Like it was,
that's amazing.
Candles. And she was like, I have to like follow my kid around. And I was like, better follow your kid around then, because like this is our dinner and I want it to be candlelit like no other. And I can do that. And I can, and I mean, she might have been upset with me, but it was also like, this is where I'm at. And I want to embrace some sort of not kid-friendly thing.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, I'm looking through the questions. Somebody said, I've spent the last 2 Christmas days alone and been so relieved to be away from the pressure to do fake happiness. But other people really struggle when I tell them I'll be alone and try and tell me to go to their houses. I don't know how to respond except no thanks. Any ideas?
I mean, just being honest with like, no, thank you. I'm enjoying being alone, and being like, I genuinely appreciate you reaching out, because I could see why you might think that I want to be with people. I also really enjoy my own company. And I think also sharing that, like saying that out loud to someone is like, I actually really enjoy my own company, might make other people feel uncomfortable because they don't, or they don't have the time to do that. But it's a gift that we get. And I think when we embrace that and lean into it, it almost like reminds other people that they can do it too, even if they do have kids or not. But it's like, no, this is acceptable for me and lovely.
Wow, what a great answer, Carrie. I love that. Okay, someone else said, do you ever feel resentful that you have to come up with these different strategies? It takes time and mental energy. Does it get easier over time, or do you just accept that this is a part of your life?
Great question. I personally love it, but that's my personality. And I do think that like it felt weird at first, and I kind of forced some, and some turned into things that I loved, and some turned, but I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. But like, this is like kind of a space where we get to explore ourselves and what we truly love. And I don't think, especially as we become older adults, we don't get a lot of time for that. And so trying to incorporate new things, trying new rituals, trying new experiences can be like a way to find out how we are our best selves and loving our best selves while we're doing it. And like, again, just being what feels good, like plain and simple as that. Like I'm now obsessed with bird feeders. I'm at that space. I love watching the birds eat. It's so silly, but it's also like so simple to where I'm like, okay, I'm a bird person now. Like I accept it. I embrace it. It's who I am.
Have you seen the ones that have the camera built in?
Yes.
I want one of those so bad. I don't live in like a place right now that I can put it up, but I'm moving back to the South in a couple of months and I am definitely getting that thing.
Oh my gosh, yes. So many people like online, because if you follow me on Instagram, I talk a lot about birds. I'm like, oh, look
Yep.
at this here.
I love it.
People are like, have you seen this? I'm like, I've seen this. I know, I see it.
So I think this question, that was a fantastic answer. I think this question was, it was sent in like 40 minutes ago. So I think it was during our conversation about like holiday strategies and the conversations. So do you have any, so this was like just having the feeling resentful about the time and energy that it takes to have to come up with like strategies just to interact with people. So does it ever get easier, or do you just accept that it's part of your life?
I think both are happening. Like, it does get easier the more you practice it. It also really sucks at the beginning. And there are many times like this zoo thing that I'm going to be going to soon where it's like, okay, like this is happening.
Yeah.
So it does. And I mean, I feel like we all have things that like make us kind of resentful in the world. Kids are not, and this is just the path that we're on. So it's I'm all about like accepting where we're at and being able to start from there and move forward. And so it's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to go do this thing. And I don't know, sometimes it gets easier and sometimes it doesn't. Like, I think I get a little more stable in my grounding of like, oh no, like that's not for me, but it's taken me a long time to get there, and a lot of practice and a lot of messing up along the way.
And I agree with you. I think for me, the kind of more I've done around my grief and the lighter my grief gets, the easier it is for me to have these conversations, because I can't really picture a time right now that someone could say anything that would make me like cry in the moment. That happens. I can't remember the last time that's happened. It's probably been a year or two, but I had like 3 years where anytime anyone said anything, I was probably going to cry. So for me, I think like doing that really deep grief work and like figuring out how to navigate that and like being intentional about that has helped me get to a place where I can do it easier now. And I think part of it is practice too. So I think it's like a mix, but I do think about this part of like, do you feel resentful that you have to think about how to navigate this? Like it is annoying. I wish that there were more awareness around it so that people knew that maybe like asking someone if they have kids isn't the best like first question to ask. But at the same time, I think that every person in life has things for them that it might not be childless for them, but childlessness for them, but it's something else. So I think that like grief is inescapable. It's part of the human experience. So someone that you're talking to may have like a chronic illness diagnosis that they're dealing with, and somebody may say something ableist to them, or somebody may have just lost a loved one, or be dealing with like mental illness, and they're like hearing the word crazy, or like, oh, that person's so OCD or whatever, like these kind of comments that come up that are really insensitive. Like, I think when you start to realize how many, that's not even like touching like the LGBTQI plus community, QIA plus community, or like, you know, what the BIPOC community deals with, like that's not even touching like people who have identities that they hold that are facing discrimination and oppression and like microaggressions in their daily lives. So I think that everyone has something. I really do. It may not be at the time, but like part of life is realizing that like you might hold identities or parts of yourself that someone's not going to understand. And I think I have a few intersecting ones because I have like the chronic illness piece, and then I also have the childlessness piece, and other people have other things. Some that they're born with and they're going to have to navigate their whole lives, and some that maybe come later. But I think about the sensitivities that I hold to other people, and things where I put my foot in my mouth, or I don't understand someone's reality or what they're going through, and I'm sure I say insensitive things because it's going to happen. But like I think all of us can be aware of like how are we recognizing what other people might be dealing with too, so that we're like being just compassionate, kind people, and realizing that everybody has something kind of equivalent to childlessness that they're going to deal with in their life. Like I don't know anyone who gets to escape grief.
Absolutely. And I feel like this path that has been paved for me, because I did not choose this, it really showed me that every single person is struggling. And like, I think about how many times I cried in private and then pulled myself out and was like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And other people are doing that for other reasons.
Yep. You don't know who that is.
Exactly.
Yep. Because you just look at, well, I won't keep going on and on, but there's just so many issues, right? Like people struggle with addiction, people struggle with mental health, people struggle with whatever, like stuff, or their family members are whatever. Like there's stuff that is touching, everyone's touched by something. Everyone has grief around something. Everyone has part of their life that they're like, this is so hard and society doesn't understand it. And I think like seeing it in the context of like, we're actually just part of the human experience and this is really normal.
And when I look at it like that, it makes me feel like it's a beautiful thing. And like losing our daughter, like it's such a tragic story, but we always like, I like to say, I had a sad story, but it doesn't mean I'm having a sad life. Like those don't have to go together. And when I started looking at my grief and like, oh, I'm lucky to have it, and almost, this maybe isn't even the right thing to say, but like almost like lying to myself saying that, because I had to like keep telling myself, to where now I actually believe it. And I'm like, what an amazing life that I have, that I've told myself that I have, and now I believe it.
Yeah. And I think part of what I love about the way that you approach all of this and your life is that you don't shy away from the grief. Like you very much validate it. I love the way that you have found ways to memorialize and keep Clementine in your life, and to be thinking about her and like building in those moments of remembrance, while also realizing that like that grief is going to exist for you, and you also want to have a life that you enjoy. And so how do you like have those two realities exist at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, this past week, Monday and Tuesday, I cried for like 6 hours both days. Like that's a reality. And it's like, but it's, you know, it's a heavy time of year. And then,
of course.
And then while I'm crying, I'm like, and I'm not even like, I don't want to say I'm not validating it, but it's like, God, I love something so much. Or like, I tried so hard to have something, like I cared about something so much. Some people don't care about anything. And I'm like, oh my God, I care about so many things that drives me crazy. Like,
same. Yeah.
So like to know that we get to have even these heavy emotions, like not everybody gets to feel that. Not everybody gets to even acknowledge that, not even in a space to be like, oh, right, this sucks. Because even me personally, I hid it for so long. Like I remember when I dealt with jealousy, that was something I really was like, this is not real. This is not happening.
Yeah.
Once I was able to identify it, it was like, oh my God, it's number one, there's a name for it. So like, there's no way I'm alone in this.
Naming your emotions is like one of the top things you can do to start processing stuff.
And so like being, I don't know, just, and I don't want to sound like flighty or whatever, but like acknowledging all of the shit that we deal with is also kind of a gift, because so many people don't have the capacity or space to do that. Holding it and being like, this is mine. Like I get to keep it. And even though people might look at me and be like, gosh, she has no children. It's like, but that's my story. And I love it because it's my story. And it makes it unique because it's mine. Yep.
I love that. Okay, so we are at time. I want to get to the very last question that we have. So maybe let's do a quick that came in for a guest, and then we'll do a wrap up. So because I know a lot of people are dealing with this, so I want to make sure we just touch on it quickly. But so I have friends who continuously post pics of their kids at Christmas on social media. I don't see why I should have to stay away from social media, as I like to keep in touch with friends, but to continuously hear how magical their Christmas is because their toddler breaks my heart. To unfriend them wouldn't be the right thing to do and cause problems. How would you deal with this? It feels like I need to say publicly that it's not a happy time for everyone.
Mute. I love the mute button.
Exactly.
And like unfollow, you know, I think that's like what's on Facebook, like you're unfollow, but you're still friends, or like snooze them for 30 days. And like, here's the deal with that, I think, because I do that all of the time. And if I really care, I can go to their page and like check and see anything. And mute is like my favorite thing. I'm like, oh, like even now to this day, when like somebody that is not in like any sort of community that I'm in, but I'm following like an influencer, if they're like, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm like, oh, bye-bye. Like,
Yep, same.
I don't want to see it. Like, I loved your cooking recipes, but I'll find them somewhere else. Like,
Totally.
Pregnancy story.
Yep. So those of you who don't know that this is a feature, you can mute people. I'm more familiar with Instagram, so I don't know what the equivalent is on Facebook, but you can just do mute. And that means they won't show up in your feed, but they don't tell the person that you muted them. So it's basically just like not having those that feed come up for you. Another thing I will just note is that like if you feel like your feed, like your social media accounts are filled up with like a lot of people who are having kids and you need breaks from that, but you still want to be on social media, you could create a second account that is curated to exactly what you want to see. So if I go into my personal Instagram account, like not my Chasing Creation, but my personal one, I only have 2 pictures up. Like I never post on there, but it is specifically curated to all the kind of stuff I want to see. There's cute animal videos, there's fun like kind of witchy stuff on there, there's like well, mostly those 2 categories. There's a lot of hair videos, makeup videos. I don't really see much from people that I follow because I think the algorithm is like, you don't ever comment or like engage with these people, so we're just going to show you memes.
Someone just wrote clean your feed, which I think is it, because when I feel like a lot of people complain about social media, I'm like, I love social media because I'm like, nope, don't want that, don't want that. That same person also said report ads about fertility or something like that. Absolutely. You go to that ad and you say, I don't want to see this again.
Yep.
And it's so nice because that was a huge thing for me. Even like on our smart television, when we get ads, I'm like, oh, where are the settings? Like, I don't want to see diaper commercial. This is not our vibe. And I love that that's like not a continual thing coming in my face.
Yep. And you can also on Instagram, there's a setting. I'm not going to remember where to find it. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. There's a setting that's like in your settings. Sorry, I'm like not making sense. But it's one that asks like, what are your interests kind of thing. And I realized that it guessed my interest and they were not right. So so part of this is like, okay, see, it's still in here. Okay. See, so I went in settings and add topics. You can't see my phone because of the glare, but it has on here. Oh, wait, it did that. So add topics we show less of. I put motherhood in there. They have a category for motherhood or like, so going through and tailoring these things. Apparently they want to show me a lot of them based on athleisure, which is not right. But yeah, like you can kind of curate your feed in that way and look for those settings.
Social media used to give me a lot of anxiety as well. And I love social media. So I was like, how can I make this work for me? And I have been able to curate my feed, clean that feed, mute, and all those quiet buttons. You don't have to unfriend them. Like that's because that'll be a whole thing.
Yeah. And just noting too, that like, it's based on an algorithm, right? So like it's guessing what it thinks you're going to want and like what you're interacting with, what you're looking at, what you're commenting on, what you're liking, all of that. So like one of the beauties, if you want to make like a second feed, you can still keep your same one, but if you want to create like a secondary account, just be really conscious of like, I'm only going to like follow and like, and like do things that bring me joy. And if you're doing that, it's going to show you more of the same. And eventually that feed is just going to be stuff that you like. And it's not going to be bringing this stuff up because you're not like engaging with that stuff. If that makes sense.
And like when you look at something, like even for my friends that I do like sometimes see their babies, I'm like, I'll just skip it or whatever. I'm like, I don't even want to look at it. Yeah. Didn't see it. It's not happening.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we covered a lot. We only went, depending on how you count it, either 5 minutes over or 35 minutes over, depending on how long you're expecting this to be, since we didn't put it in time. But I feel like I could talk to you for 5 more hours and we'd still be going, but we'll call it. I appreciate you so much, Carrie, and I just love your perspective. Carrie has a website is it just bloomingwithcare.com? I know I linked it in the invitation. So bloomingwithcare.com. You can also find her on Instagram as we're talking about feed and wanting great things in your feed. Add hers. You will love what comes up. And that's at Blooming with Care, like CARE. And Carrie, you are just a phenomenal person. Like ever since I started following your account, I'm like, I just want to be friends with her. And I'm just so grateful to have gotten to know you over the last few years. And you're such a light in this world and a keeper of darkness too. Like I love that you are able to just balance that, like grief and joy, and let them both exist and be honest and authentic about both. And this might be weird, but I just love you so much. So.
I love you too. And it was funny because I was chatting with some people about doing this. And I remember that when we got to the point of like, I don't think we're going to try for kids anymore, I thought of you and was like, okay, I know this person online that's like happy, like it can be done. And how that space is a gift that continues to give. So I'm very grateful for you as well, because my goodness, do we need all sorts of stories to like representation matters. And I really appreciate what you've brought. And I feel so honored to be a part of this. Like what a joy.
I know. Welcome to the club you didn't want to, that you fought for like a decade to not be in.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's the best life I've ever thought I couldn't have lived. So it's
well, I have to say I've met some of the most amazing people since I have been in this community. I am just always just floored by the incredible people I've met and seeing what they're doing with their lives. And you're one of those. So thank you so much. And for those of you who joined, thank you. I love it, even though we see you in the chat, but I also just feel the energy of like knowing that there are people here. So I really appreciate you being here. Thank you. I hope that you picked up some good ideas for navigating this next month or so and beyond. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Carrie.
Bye.